What is up, fellow summoners? Thanks for stopping by the channel today. This is going to be my first look, full ability walkthrough and kind of explanation for the character Nebula, which as always I will leave a link in the description to MCOC Mod, the original video. Make sure you go over and leave that a like. Really appreciate him putting this out early for the community. That way we can get our hands on it, kind of decide for ourselves if it's worth going for as a featured 5-star hero or worth the grind that we'll have to put in the many hours to get. So let's walk through Nebula's abilities first, then we'll get into the gameplay and break everything down, let you guys know what I think. So in the Yondu video, when I was looking through his attributes, he was basically, you know, one of the top champs as far as base critical rating, critical damage, all of that goes. He sat just below Rocket Raccoon, and then quickly he's been supplanted here by Nebula. Her critical rating and critical damage are both a little bit ahead of where Yondu is at. Her base damage as well, you can see at 2437 there in the background, is also a little bit higher by a little over 100 points than Yondu's. The health actually is not too far off. I know these are kind of maxed out 5 stars, but Yondu is at 31,000 HP. She's at 29,000 HP, so not really too big of a difference there. Even the armor rating is exactly the same. Block proficiency is down quite a bit by almost 700 points. But overall, when you compare the two characters side by side, Yondu and Nebula, as far as their HP goes, fairly similar. Block rating, armor rating, all that's fairly similar. But Nebula of the two is going to be hitting quite a bit harder. I think the difference that you see there is that Yondu does have armor penetration and he does have armor breaks, so I think both of those things kind of make up the difference between the damage. But just merely from a base stats, kind of an attributes, just comparing side by side, it does look like she's probably going to be right at the top of the tech class as far as damage output, sitting just below Rocket Raccoon in terms of actual physical base stats. So it's really nice to see that it looks like in both of the new tech champs that are coming, they're both going to be able to do a fairly good amount of damage, which is really nice to see. The tech class as a whole is fairly kind of blah. I know you've got Star-Lord there, but he's kind of the outlier in the group. Rocket does have a strong potential to do great damage, but he can't take really any hits. His survivability utility is really low, so he never gets used. So definitely really nice to see the tech class get a boost to their damage output. Seeing big numbers is always a lot of fun, so I am all for that. I don't typically point out synergies just because they're fairly straightforward. You can read them for yourself. But in this case, I found her synergies a little bit unique in that she's got actually a double synergy with one single character. You can see there with Gamora, she not only gains the 6% health boost, but she also gains a critical damage rating. And I'm sure somebody will correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong here, but I can't think, at least right off the top of my head, of any other characters that currently have a double synergy from one single character like this. So fairly unique, not a game changer by any means, but just wanted to point it out. Alright, so let's jump over into the fun stuff in her ability list. I'm going to skip over the awakened ability, come back to that in just a second, and start down in the passive. Nebula starts the fight with 2 self-repair charges that activate when the opponent deals more than 110% of their attack in a single hit. That's kind of the big sticking point there. It repairs the damage taken over 5 seconds. If stunned during her self-repair, the repair stops. So you can kind of think of this like limbo, so to speak. You know, any damage you receive during limbo is reversed right back. In this case, any single hit that is more than 110% of their attack, you're going to receive back that full damage. On the surface, it sounds okay, but to be honest with you, you're going to have to get hit pretty hard in a single hit for them to do 110% of their overall attack. I guess if crits, you know, if a medium crit would trigger this, I guess that would be okay. But for the most part, you know, specials are going to trigger this, but I don't get hit by specials. You know, you can evade that. You know those are coming. You can get out of the way. So really, that part of it I find a little bit lackluster. You know, a lot of the damage I take is from abilities I can't work around, like Limbo. You know, maybe a poison ability, a degeneration ability, some sort of a bleed. But none of those things are going to trigger this self-repair. So unfortunately, I think it's going to be a little bit garbage, to be honest with you. Which leads me back up to the awakened ability. If you do manage to use both of your self-repairs in a fight, she is going to start, what does it say here? Recalibrating her implants, granting her a 100% chance to regain a charge every 10 seconds. And do keep in mind that 100% chance is based on the fact that it is a fully maxed out level 200 signature ability. I would imagine, and I'm just speculating here, the first time you awaken her, that's probably going to be down somewhere in the 75% chance, maybe somewhere 70-75% chance. So you'll only get up to that 100% chance once she's fully awakened. Overall, I mean, I'd love to see regens in characters. I mean, I will definitely take it. I would rather have it than not. You know, from time to time, you will get clipped with maybe a heavy attack would trigger this, or a special that you get hit by. But for the most part, from a fight to fight, you're not going to probably see this thing being triggered, unfortunately. So, I don't know. I think that makes it a little bit garbage, to be honest. Then walking through the rest of the passive abilities here, ability accuracy of robots is reduced by 20% per electric shock charge, which you'll see here in a minute. She can apply electroshocks. I don't know how useful this is, to be honest. There just aren't that many robot characters in the game. I can really only think of Ultron and Vision off the top of my head. I guess Nebula herself may fall into this, you know, if you're fighting against another Nebula. But I don't know. For now, I think that's kind of a useful ability. Maybe further down the road when we see more robotic champs added to the game. But for now, just be aware of it, but doesn't make her God tier by any means. The other thing that is really awesome here is that she is fully immune, like other robotic characters, to both poison and bleed effects. So this is kind of the Suicide Mastery builder's dream. I always love having characters who are immune like this. It just adds another layer of utility, gives you more options when you run up against special events, you know, or characters who've got some sort of special bleed or poison to be able to work around. So that's really, really nice as well. So let's talk about her Electroshock charge. This seems to be a big part of her abilities and a big part of her damage output, and it is linked to a hold down ability. And I'm always a little bit scared when I see these, because sometimes they're done well and sometimes they're absolute garbage. I'm thinking of Kamala Khan, I'm thinking of Gambit, where you have to kind of get out of your normal gameplay to be able to build the charges, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I think that they have either listened to the community or they're just trying something different, but I think that this is actually going to work out really well. So first off, when you swipe back, when you're holding your block, you build an electro charge every 0.9 seconds. And from the gameplay that you'll see later, I'm not sure what the upper end of that is, because in the gameplay I think she gets somewhere between like 15 and 16 charges. But for every single charge, when she releases it, it does 974 damage, at least for this character here. Which is excellent, especially when you're talking about double-digit shock charges being built up. But the way that you release this is really cool. It says well-timed block. Basically, that is a parry, which we do parrying all the time, and that is why I love it so much. It's part of the normal gameplay. It doesn't take me out of the normal flow of the gameplay in any way. So basically, anytime that I parry stun them, I'm going to be releasing all of those electric charges in the form of a shock that's going to tick away. But what I love so much about that is the shock is going to affect both bleed immune and poison immune champions. You know, the shock is something totally different. So if you're running up against characters who are bleed immune, let's say in Alliance War, having some issues getting around them, you know, this would be an excellent choice. The shock is still going to be doing tons of damage. In addition to that, I find it kind of interesting. The heavy attack also puts a shock on the opponent. So this pairs really, really well with, or I didn't mean to say that, pairs with parry, but when you parry, they're going to be stunned for a second. You're going to release all of your electroshock charges. Then if you follow that up with a heavy attack while they're stunned in the parry, you're going to add another shock on top of that. So really, really unique. I would be super interested to find out how many shock charges you can build up, kind of what the maximum number is on that. But yeah, if you're getting into the double digits pretty frequently throughout the fight, that is going to be a lot of passive damage that you're doing. Looks really, really cool. Then if that wasn't cool enough, they follow it up with the special attack 1 here. So you've got your option. With the special attack 1, you're going to power lock and power drain the champ. And for each electroshock charge you have, it is going to do a longer power lock, and it is going to power drain more of the enemy's power. So it's really cool. You've got the option there. If I've got, let's say I build up, I don't know, 10, 12 electroshock charges, and I'm in a fight where, you know, I'm dealing with Spite or I'm dealing with somebody on a power gain node, I can choose to just hold on to those shocks. And if you've got, let's say 10, let's just say 10, I feel like that's a pretty safe number you can get to. That's a 10-second power lock. That's over a 30% power drain. You know, and then you can actually follow that up with a parry and release all of that damage. So you can actually use it both ways. It doesn't say here that when you use your special attack 1 that you use up your electroshock charges. You can just use them to your benefit to power lock, to power drain, and then release all of that damage on top of that with a parry. I think that mechanic, I think that work together is really, really cool. I think they nailed it as far as utility goes, being able to put those things together. The special attack 2 doubles the amount of shock debuffs on the opponent. So again, her shock, you can see here, is definitely something that you're going to be using throughout the fight. If you're able to, let's say, parry stun and release, let's say, 10 charges of electroshock on the enemy, and then immediately follow that up with an S2. If they've got 10 shocks on them, you are doubling that over 3 seconds, so she's really going to be pouring on the damage here. And then finally with the S3, if all that wasn't enough as far as damage and electroshock goes, her S3 is probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen in the game. So when she uses her S3 for 10 seconds, you're going to see this buff pop up, which it's a blue like tech buff. Rocket Raccoon has got the same thing with his armor up abilities, you'll see it. But it lasts for 10 seconds, and what it does is every time that she is in contact with the enemy during that 10-second period, whether that be you hitting them, if they're blocking, if they're not blocking, if they are hitting you, whether you're blocking or not, every time that you're in contact with the enemy, you're placing another shock on them for 3 seconds. So she is going to be absolutely crazy. I'm calling it now. She's going to be absolutely crazy with these shocks. I think especially in longer fights, when you're able to build up these things, I think you're going to see really, really big numbers. I cannot wait to get my hands on her. I'm calling it now. Of the 2 tech champs, I think that Nebula is the one I'm certainly going to be going for. I can only imagine her as a 5-star champ, the amount of damage she's going to be doing. I wish that she had a little bit better of a regen, but I think after you look through the amount of damage she's putting out, I think that's kind of how they put the check and balance on her. Is yes, they did give her a little bit of regen because I think the community is calling for more regen champs, but they didn't make the regen really OP since her damage output looks to be pretty OP at this point. But again, we'll have to wait and see. But just again from the very surface here, from a very kind of first take, I'm very, very excited for Nebula, if you couldn't tell. Alright, so as the fight starts here, let me pause it. You'll see there on the top left, the yellow, or not yellow, excuse me, the gray up arrow heart thing. That is her self-repair charge. So that is going to sit there until she receives an attack, a single attack that is more than 110% of the enemy's overall attack. Better strategy is just don't get hit. But she does use that. She will get hit by an S2. Spoiler alert, but yeah, we'll see that trigger here in a minute. So, start the fight off. At this point, you're probably, if it was me, you'd want to kind of swipe back and build up some electro charges. But you see there, let me pause it again. She does hold block for a second, 0.9 seconds. She gains 1 electroshock charge. It's that blue kind of lightning bolt thing. And then she immediately tries to use her S1, which unfortunately it does not land. If it would have landed, you would have gotten a power lock for a second, and it would have drained 3.5% of the enemy's power. Because she only had 1 electroshock. So it didn't land. We weren't able to see any of that, but do keep all of that in mind. Now at this point, I think she does land a heavy. Yeah, she's trying to land a heavy right here. We should see it. Yep, she spins up, lands it, and immediately you see the shock that is applied. That is a 100% chance. Every single time you use a heavy, you're going to apply a shock, which is pretty useful. It is ticking away fairly well there. Alright, here you do see her take an S2 to the face, so that does trigger one of her self-repairs. You see that she had 2 self-repairs there. One of those was used up as a regen. It is ticking away. It's fairly strong regen if you want to call it that. But to be honest, it's better just not to have been hit by the S2 at all. But I digress. So at this point, I do believe you start to see her build up a few shocks. No, she goes into her S2, which again, unfortunately, we didn't see any of her abilities being used there. Her S2 is going to duplicate however many shocks you have on the enemy. So a better option would have been to kind of hold back and build up some electroshock charges, parry, transfer all of those electroshock charges to the enemy, and then use the S2. So again, not great gameplay as far as explanation-wise, being able to see it. But again, keep that in mind. So now we do see her finally starting to build up some electroshock charges. And really, I mean, she built up 5 there fairly quickly. I could see yourself getting to 10 with really not much of a problem. But the interesting thing there is she doesn't have mastery, so she can't parry. But she did essentially parry. It was just a regular block, as what you saw. But it transferred all of those 5 electroshock charges from her over to Yondu in the form of a shock that is very strong. You can see it ticking away there at 408. And immediately she can go back and start to build up the charges again. So that is something that probably we're going to be seeing a lot. She follows that up with a heavy, so you gain the 6th shock there that is ticking away. Really a very interesting mechanic. I find it very cool, to be honest. Now at this point, this is what I mentioned before. She is really building up the charges all the way up to 16. And you'll notice right here, I think it's going to happen. Yeah, right there. That would have been a parry in game. That is what they consider a well-timed block. So immediately she transferred all of those shocks, all 17 of those shocks, over to him, and that killed him right away. I know he's about dead. I would have loved to actually see that thing tick out longer, but a very, very strong shock indeed. And then we'll skip forward because she was not able to show the S3 in that fight. We'll skip forward to it here. And this is what you want to keep an eye out for, is the kind of the overcharge that she gets. It's the blue debuff that you'll see at the end of this. It lasts for 10 seconds, and during that time period, anytime that you're in contact, whether you're hitting or you're getting hit, each one of those hits is going to be a shock charge on the enemy. So you'll see it right here. He is actually hitting her, building up the shock charges. She turns right around, hits him a couple times. So the S3 itself is going to do a lot of damage, not in and of itself necessarily, but you can see there, even with block damage, you're going to be building those shocks up quite a bit. I think that she is going to be a very strong champion to add to your roster. Definitely a character I say that you could go for as a 5-star because she does have all of that utility built into her on top of all the damage she's going to do. Double immunity, bleed, and poison immune. She's got the very strong power lock potential and power drain with her S1. She's got all that massive damage output. I think that she's going to be a very strong Alliance War offensive character. I don't see that Mystic Dispersion is really going to be an issue. I wouldn't imagine that those Electroshock charges are going to be considered buffs that Mystic Dispersion will kick in. I think the only time that you're going to see it is when she goes into self-repair, which honestly you're probably not going to see a whole lot. That really is just kind of a side note. Her self-repair basically is just kind of something slapped on at the end. I wouldn't say she's necessarily a character that you need to have awakened. I don't really think that that makes that big of a difference to her overall gameplay. So yeah, don't want to oversell her yet until we actually play with her ourselves. But looks like a strong champ. I think of the two, I'm going to probably be grinding for her. We'll see how things go, but yeah. Looks really, really cool. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. Hopefully this was a decent explanation. I know there's a lot of information here to kind of digest. But yeah, let me know what you think. If you got any questions, hit me up in the comment section. Hit me up over on Twitter. Until I see you guys in the next video, have a great day.